So I guess tonight, maybe we can kind of talk about chapters. Since we didn't talk about the chapters last week, really it's kind of the wild, wild west. If you've read the whole book, we're not going to just stop at the end of the book. So if you want to bring anything up from the chapters as the conversation goes on tonight, please feel free to. You know, one thing, I'd like to get the conversation started by talking about something that Selenis said towards the end of the book about the foster care system as a whole. When we first started this book, the very first session, I remember us talking a lot about the systems, government systems, immigration, and the foster care system, and the public school system even, and talking about how those systems were so involved, so a part of this family's life. And there's a point towards the end of the book, I think it's on page 226, where Marizol has confessed to everything. She's in the hospital and she's confessed everything to Selenis. And there's a part where Selenis starts talking and she's talking about how frustrated she feels with the foster care system and how it could even be so weak of a system that it would allow Jose to go back, or Marizol, Jose at the time, to go back to his mother's parents, biological parents. And I just kind of wanted to bring that conversation full circle. Like, what do y'all think about that? What do you think about that idea? I just watched this documentary on Netflix. It's called, I think it's called The Trials of Gabriel Martinez. And it's about this little boy who was like caught up in the system and was with a great foster family. Actually, his uncle and his partner happened to be a man. It was a gay couple, and great life, you know, loved him so much. And something happened and he ended up, the foster care, or the system ended up sending him back to his mother, where his mother was, I think, living with a boyfriend at the time, and they were abusing him so bad, and they ended up killing him. He ended up dying. I think he was like 7 or 6 when he died. And this documentary, it's on Netflix. It's called The Trials of Gabriel Martinez, and it's, you know, it'll blow your mind. If you've never dealt with that system before, if you've never had any experience, especially with that system, the child care system, it'll blow your mind. You won't be able to conceive or imagine that this boy was sent back to, Gabriel was sent back to his parents. And so to see that the same thing kind of happens here, I don't know, that was just something I thought a lot about. So I don't know, what do you guys think about that? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? What do y'all think about that idea of having so much trust in these systems, right, that we all rely on, especially systems that take care of poor, abandoned children, and then kind of finding out that they are fraudulent or maybe not as strong as we hope they would be? What do y'all think about that?
I think trust, good evening, everybody. I think it's trusting the system and relying on the system are very different things, especially when you think about how prevalent that issue is with children being in the system, or minors being in the system. We hope that they would do the right thing and that the system is there to protect them. But in the situation that Marizol faced and what, you know, ultimately came to pass that, you know, she was going through, I have to wonder if anybody was doing any type of wellness check, if anybody was following through on what it was that they're required to do, rather than, you know, going under the premise that, oh, we want to make sure that the child is with the parents and we want to do the right thing. But what do you do to make sure whatever it is that caused them to be removed in the first place, what do you do to make sure that that is not happening? And I think that's where the cracks become gaping holes. and where a lot of these kids end up being in worse situations than where they began. So yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind when I read that, wondering what, who checked on her, who followed through. Same thing with Gabriel Martinez. It's a very, very difficult documentary to watch. Very difficult, but it's also probably not the only story. It's just one of the few we know about.
Yeah, you're right. Y'all, there's a part of, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it because it is difficult. You're right, Latisha. It is difficult to watch, and thank you for that. But it'll blow your mind. There's a part in there, there's a part in that documentary where a former social service worker is talking about how they had to house children in the building, like in the social, like the building where he worked at, like his office and stuff. Just because they didn't have anywhere else to put them. It'll blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. So yeah, what are some other thoughts on that?
One of the biggest problems for me, I used to work as a visit coach for the Department of Social Services, and pretty much the children that I dealt with were already in the foster care system. So it was my job to bring the children from foster care and the parents from wherever they were, bring everybody together, and then take notes on the interaction between the children and their parents. So I was kind of like teaching the parents how to be parents, dealing with the parents after the children went back to the foster care system or whatever group home they were in. And I learned that there is such a shortage of foster mothers or foster parents in the foster care system. And because of that shortage, I had two foster parents who allegations were made against these foster parents for abuse by the children that they were caring for, who I was doing visit coaching with. They would remove the kids from the home, and then eventually the kids would subsequently go back to the foster mother. And I didn't get it. I said, wait a minute, if this is like her third or fourth allegation that's being made by the mom during our visits who sees a bruise or a mark or a lump on their child, how do you put the kids back with the foster mother? If there's clearly an issue with her. But like I said, there's such a shortage of foster parents. A lot of kids are falling through cracks because no one is really checking, or they know if this foster home is closed down, where do you put all of these children where they don't have anybody to take them? So it's kind of like a hard situation to be in, especially for the kids,
Most especially for the kids, right?
I thought about that a lot. Thank you, Simone, for sharing that. And I thought, I'm actually so glad you said that, because I'm doing some research for this documentary that's coming out, right? And it's about the children who are at the border right now. So I guess before I got this gig, I didn't know anything. I guess I really did think that it was like the system's fault. You know what I'm saying? And like literally, not literally Donald Trump, not even someone he worked with. In my mind, literally Donald Trump was ripping nursing babies from the bosom of a loving mother. That's literally what I thought was going on. But what's happening is like the children are left there by their parents. They're left there. They're like abandoned. Their parents aren't there at all at the border. But the borders are closed right now, which I also didn't know. So you have these people that work there that are just like, we don't know what to do. Like, we have no idea. We don't know where their parents are. And we can't just send them on their way, because I send them where? Their parents aren't here. And they're like young, like 8, 12, So
I think it would be more I'm sorry, Brandon, but I think it would be more accurate to say that they weren't left there. They were taken from their parents, and then their parents were sent back to their countries. So
that's what I thought was happening most of the time too, but that's actually not true. And I only know this because I've been talking to people that work there. Similar to Simone, this is what brought it up. Similar to Simone being a social worker, these people that work at the border, they're saying that that's actually not the case most of the time. The case is that these children were sent to the border. Their parents are nowhere around. I thought that too. I thought that they were separated on some like a threat type of thing. That's what I thought it was, but that's not the case. And so, you know, it's easy. Simone, I'm really glad you said what you said, because it's really easy, right, for us to blame this foster care system. But when you talk to someone who's worked there, it's the whole situation is nuanced. It's so tricky, you know. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to kind of add to that?
I would. I think that, you know, the overall goal is reunification no matter what. So they're going to try their best, and, you know, they go and observe the parents, et cetera. And Simone, you may speak on this more, but, you know, when the overall goal is reunification, it's better than being caught up in the system, they seem to think. So they're going to continuously try to get those parenting classes, et cetera, you know, and sadly, it's just a lot of flaws in that system, I think, but.
You're right. You're 100% right. And another thing I noticed, just dealing with the parents, yes. You're 100% right. The parents take every kind of class you could think of, everything. And the ultimate goal is some of these parents only want their kids back for the money, you know, and I get to speak to the parents, like I said, when the kids leave, and it's like, oh, you know, I really need to get these classes because I really need this money to get housing, and I really need this money to get this. And I'm looking at the parents and I'm like, wait a minute, you're only doing this to try to get your kids back for the money? And they're like, yeah, well, I got six kids spread around different group homes and foster homes. And I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. You know, it's insane. And Brandon, you're right. You have children that were caught up in this whole border situation, and the kids were by themselves. They were coming across the border and wasn't even with a parent. It blew my mind. And these kids were small, 6 and 7 year olds, just walking aimlessly and no parent to be found.
Yeah. And no one really know, unless you are in it and speaking to people who work there, you think it's a different situation, and it's not. And yes. That, I think, you know, is, you know, I thought about this a lot in reading this book and doing that research. You know, my mind is really, I'm in a peculiar situation right now, because kind of similar to what Miss Sherry was saying before, what I thought I knew before, and how much empathy I had before, and what I thought I sided with, and what I thought before we read this book has changed a lot. You know, I do have a lot of more empathy than I thought I had, and it's really, what do y'all think about this? It's really because, you know, a couple weeks ago, especially when we were talking about Marizol stealing the $18,000 and we really, I think we all got to a point where we're like, it's not about her, you know, being trans. Like, it's not about that at all. It's about how are you going to repay, you know, we were really on that. And I think for me, that humanized Marizol a lot for me, and my whole kind of thinking changed. It's because she was so vulnerable, I was able to say, like, I don't care about you being trans. How are you going to get this money back? You know, you're like, I think like that idea of someone that's being as vulnerable as possible, right? They can with you at the end of the day, nothing matters except like how human they are. Yeah. Either they did a great thing that you are really inspired by and you're passionate about, or they strike your passion in a different way, right? Like Marizol did when we read about her stealing the money and going out all night and partying. You know, we had a completely different reaction. We weren't inspired, we were upset, you know? And I think that for me, do y'all see what I'm saying? That for me, like really humanized, it made me have empathy, not because someone is transgendered or someone has transitioned, but because they're human, you know? I don't know, it just elevated my thinking on so many different levels.
I think a lot of that's also stemming from the fact that, sorry, I'm chewing, but we need to resist like imposing morality even on someone who's oppressed. And I think that's what's happening with the conversation about the money, is that, well, they're going through this struggle, and this struggle, so we expect you to be the exemplar of certain ethics and morality. And where is that coming from exactly? Why should we place that on her for that reason? And it's unfair to not just her, but to any trans person in that situation. You know, she's particularly vulnerable, has had to do survival sex work for a bit there. She doesn't go as in detail in the book as with other struggles, but it's like, unless you kind of have that lifestyle, and it's really hard to really pass judgment on that as well. And without going kind of digressing too much, there is actually a real life example that mirrors the stealing of the $18,000 that was very prominent. I'll try and sum it up really quickly. A very well-known person on Twitter, transgender woman named Sai, who's like young, early 20s, recently had started a GoFundMe. And this was like over a year ago, but a month ago, she staged or faked a kidnapping. So she released this video where she was claiming that she was kidnapped and that she was in a closet locked away and these guys were going to harm her. And her friends were like saying, oh my God, this is terrible. So then it turned into this whole thing and people started sending tons of money to her GoFundMe that she already had set up from a year prior because, you know, trans Black woman struggle to get by living on her own. And then it came out that she faked the whole thing, and she admitted she faked the whole thing, and people were saying, oh, send the money back. You need to give people back their money. She eventually did refund them. But the point being of all of that is like, yes, it's very easy to say, how dare you do something like that? But a lot of people aren't asking, well, what drives a person to go to such lengths to try and get that? It's one thing if you're like any type of big time white scammer. What are you talking about, Donald Trump or any other con artist you want to talk about? It's like, yeah, it's easy to say greed, greed, greed. But with someone like this, it's like they're struggling to survive. It's that simple. So unless like you're in a similar situation, it's hard to really pass judgment and say, well, how could you do such a thing? Unless you are someone in community with this person who is directly harmed by them. So, you know, all that to say, you know, not imposing morality and ethics on people just because we feel they should always be making the right decisions.
Yeah. Oh, you know, yes, you're right to everything that you said. What do y'all think about that? What are some thoughts about what Greg just said, actually?
Well, I wanted to speak to, I think it has to do with what Greg said too, but if I understood, Brandon, what you were talking about before about at the border, when you were connecting that and what you were learning about that with what Simone was saying about, you know, working with children in foster care and the parents and the judgments and I guess I thought that what you were saying, Brandon, was that you were surprised that children who were walking across the border were 6 and 7 year olds by themselves, and that there was something about that, does that say something about their parents? Like maybe.
No, I wasn't saying that it said something about their parents. I was saying that I was judging America in the sense of like, how could you have all these children cramped here? You know?
Oh, okay.
And I found out that I really thought that they put the children in one cramped space and the adults, their parents, in another cramped space. I really thought that's what was happening.
Okay.
So it's not to say anything about their parents, you know. Yeah, it wasn't about, I wasn't judging anyone's parenting by any means.
Okay. Because I don't, you know, I just, I felt a little sensitive about how you were hearing that, because I know that it's very painful for parents to be sending their children, breaking up their own families and sending their children across the border. And my sense of that is because, you know, in countries like, you know, in Central America, Honduras and Guatemala, these children are being forced into gangs, and it's a very, very dire situation, and parents are being kind of pushed to this place where, how do I save my child? And a way to save their child is to send them across the border by themselves, because they're in a better position to not be deported if they took their child with them and crossed the border as a way of protecting them. They'd be much more likely to be sent back. So just kind of in line with the stuff about how we are, what Greg was saying about our morality, of how the lens we look at it, and how do we, you know, do we understand the backstory of what's, you know, pushing people to do things that we might think, you know, like, how could you do that? But that there are these, you know, deeper reasons why people are, you know, doing the things that they're doing.
Yeah, there's nothing about the backstory that I don't understand. I guess it's the future that I'm concerned with, you know. And also, you know, I see a lot of people I admire, but some of my colleagues, you know, posting photos and after of like cramped conditions with a lot of children. And I think like, well, you know, which I really genuinely didn't know. I guess I was allowing headlines to tell me all of the news, which is embarrassing to admit, but I didn't know that the borders were closed. I didn't know until last week. I didn't know. I know it's a global pandemic, and that I get it that the borders are closed, but I genuinely did not know until last week that the borders were closed. So knowing that and knowing that children are being sent there, I guess it's the forward that I think about, because it's not the backstory, it's not the idea of anything about the backstory that I don't get. I guess for me, it's almost like it's difficult to judge the conditions that people are in at the border right now. That's kind of what Simone was talking about, her being a social worker and talking to people who are working at the border now, interviewing them, and it's kind of like that kind of full circle. It's difficult for me to judge the conditions of how anyone is being housed at the border right now, considering that the border is closed. So I don't know. I guess I'm learning so much, and you know, it's a fun space. It's a challenging space, but even with this book, it's a challenging space to be in when you thought that, you know, something was black or white, you know, and then you find out it's actually gray. So yeah, I guess it's what's going forward, what I really wonder about, you know, about that situation. You know, what's going to happen? Like, what are we going to do? I guess that's the backstory. There's nothing about it that confuses me. It's the future that I'm confused about. Because these are young kids. They have their whole lives, literally their whole lives. And you know, and I wonder what's going to happen. You know, that's to be that young and to be under those very stressful conditions. I don't know. Because I talked to some Republicans, and their solution is just to send the kids back, and I guess I don't believe that. I don't know.
Now, can you imagine how Marisol felt when she was left somewhere without any kind of understanding as to what was going to happen to her, and then she's going through the whole transition, you know, of dealing with being transgender, and you know, that's adding extra to a situation that's already extra, you know. So I can't even imagine, you know, what the struggle of young people are just trying to navigate through the whole situation that they're in and still keep their sanity, you know.
I really like what Greg said, imposing morality. I don't know the rest of what you said, Greg. I really like what you said. And I guess as you said that, I was thinking all cultures have expectations and rules against stealing, you know, and I think that's where I was really like, okay, you don't get a pass for this. You know, you stole $18,000 from your parents. And, you know, and in my family, you know, that was against the rules, expectations, you know, and we grew up at a different time as well, but that to me was, again, just recklessness. You know, 18,000, it wasn't $50. It wasn't 100. I think the amount is what makes me so, it freaks me out, because that's a huge amount of money with no real penalty for it. So, you know, we talk about, you know, how does it teach a child anything when there's no true consequence for the behavior? And did she ever stop to think, wow, this is a lot of money? It just sounds like it was boom, 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 just spending recklessly. And I get, you know, what you're saying about the bullying in school and those things, but accountability, I guess, where do we draw the line for accountability? And the behavior, as far as anyone taking that amount of money, to me, that's wrong, you know, I think, and I don't think that's like a moral opinion. It's just it's what do you call it? Ethical? I don't know if that's the right word.
Absolutely. And I think that, though, what you're saying, Ms. Sherry, is I think that is what just for me really kind of increased my empathy level, you know, in the sense, which sounds crazy, her stealing increased my empathy, but in the sense that it didn't have anything to do with you being trans. Like your gender is the last thing I'm thinking about. I want to know what your plan is to repay the money you stole. You see what I'm saying? That's what really, I don't know, that's what really increased my empathy in a way, because at that point, I don't care, nothing matters except your plan to repay, right, the money that
you're justifying their moral compass which is off. It has nothing to do with the value. It's the fact that they stole period from their family. To put a value on it is to justify what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So the moral compass is off already. So I wouldn't say that, you know. So it's
anyone else.
She does. Marisol did say last week that part of that is about trying to find and build a community, that she used a lot of that money. I don't know what percentage of the money, but she used it to try to connect with her community, her trans queer community. And that doesn't justify stealing that sum of money, but there is this sort of primal urge to be part of something greater than ourselves. And how much would you sacrifice to reach that community or group or committee or however you define it? Like, how much are you willing to sacrifice to find a place of comfort, a place where, you know, in that in Cheers, where the beginning of Cheers, that TV show, they said a place where everybody knows your name. Like, you know, what are you willing to do to get there?
Great. I also think it's a reaction, or her acting out, really, is what that is. And I think you could point to that with any youth who is struggling in any way, whether it's through gender identity, sexuality, whatever it is. Just think of all we read the end of the book. I mean, all the unprocessed trauma, like we find out, you know, she was molested by the biological father, the abusive boyfriend, you know, even though that was later on after she stole, but it's like all these things that kind of build up can explain it. It doesn't excuse it, but it can explain it. The idea of wanting to take the money, even if their parents treated her well and they took her in and all that other stuff, it does explain it if it doesn't necessarily excuse it. And as far as accountability goes, even when the parents wanted to keep it in-house, they couldn't, right? Because like systems do, the police had to run it up and arrest her. They had no choice. So even when they wanted to handle it in-house in their own family, they had no choice, because the system says, because it was this much money, we have to take her away and lock her up. So that's what they did. So even when they do try and have any sort of accountability, the system says, well, no, the system's always going to interfere and say, no, we do it this way. It's punishment, which, you know, also speaks to the foster care system too. I know we moved on from it, but it's about punishment more than it is about protection. It's about punishing parents who, either through addiction issues, they're not able to properly care for their child. The fact that Ruth, her biological mother, she gave Marizol back, if you recall, right? That was her choice. The system didn't do that. She knew, her own motherly instincts say, I can't care for this child now. I'm going to put her with the parents that I know can take care of her. The system didn't help with that. Yeah. The system just interferes. The system disrupts. It disrupts families. It, you know, it punishes, like I said.
I think all throughout, but to me, Marizol, she loved her family, but it was always some hesitancy as far as the closeness, I think. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but even like she and her sister, it's like they loved each other, but then they were really hesitant as far as some of the things they discussed, the secrets that they kept. Now, I know this is an adoptive family situation, but there were some, in one sense, it's like, yes, we're sisters, we're family. But then to me, there was always like a wall that prevented them from going to that next level you know, I know that they loved each other, but there was always something really different I felt all throughout with the family situation. You know, I don't know if it was a detachment from Marizol, maybe some things she was experiencing, but I never got to see, I never felt that real sense of, wow, we're family, we're blood, well, we're not blood, but we're bond, you know. And again, I felt that they loved each other, but it's something missing, something that was blocked.
Yes, it was a lack of intimacy. Like me and my sister, I know, me and my sister know each other's deepest, darkest secrets. Stuff you would have to kill us to, you know what I'm saying? We know that's where and that is how we show our closeness, right? However, Marizol and Selenis have a different way of showing their closeness. And it's by, you're right, Ms. Sherry, it is by like a love, like a connection like that. But they both admitted multiple times in the book and when they were here that they didn't really know a lot about each other. They didn't know what was going on in each other's lives like that. So what do y'all think about that? And Greg, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Greg.
I was thinking, Greg, and I'm sorry. How do you pronounce your name, Mr. Palmer? How do you pronounce your first name? Oh, he left us. Is it
I don't think I heard you. Is it Lasaya?
Lasia.
Lasia, thank you
Yes.
for chiming in earlier. I really appreciated what you were saying too. And I want to, Ron, I want to hear what you just had to say, but I also, maybe after that we can follow up on what Lasia had to say about the idea of kind of putting you and Greg's ideas together. The idea of every teenager, you know, makes mistakes and parties all night and maybe steals some money and it doesn't matter the amount, versus the idea of it does matter the amount and the systems are corrupt. And I do kind of want to dive into that conversation a little bit more, but Ron, do you mind?
I just wanted to remind everyone that there is an age difference between them. So I cannot remember what it was, but it felt like at least 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if they're gonna have that kind of age difference between siblings, you're not gonna know each other as well as siblings who might be a year or two apart. You know, that was one. Two, this is, you know, even though Selenis is providing love to Marizol, it seems like Selenis and the mom is where it ends. Marizol speaks about, like, in when she was young, you know, there being like this masculine environment, like around the holidays and family gatherings and things like that. So that can only further to marginalize you from your family, even though people might not be calling you, you know, faggot or whatever. You feel that difference. You feel how people are treating you, particularly when you're young. And I'm sure that had something to do with that distance that you know, she has from her family.
And Brandon, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, just wanted to say this really quick. I don't know if you guys remember, but Marizol even said, she said, if I had not taken that money, I would have never been pushed to be the person that I am, you know, to really show who she truly is as a person. She would have probably been in denial a lot longer, or denied herself that opportunity to really be who she truly is.
Okay, so what do you think about that though, Miss Anna Marie? Like, what do you think about that? Like, I get it. There ain't nothing about it I don't get, you know, like I get 100% of it, but I also understand, you know, what Lasia is saying, that it doesn't matter how much you took and it doesn't matter for what reason you stole. Your moral compass is off. You know, what do you think about that? Like, this is where it gets really, really interesting for me, because I agree with both, you know, but I'm not quite sure on what I settle on, I guess. Does that make sense?
I see where you're coming from. I think that, you know, she's trying to rationalize what she's done. And to do that, it's like, I guess she has to reckon with herself, because at the end of the day, Did she need that to become who she is? That's what she's saying. She needed that to become who she is. So that means you had to do wrong to go to be within your. To me, I don't agree with it. I think that she's justifying a wrong.
Right. I get
And at the end of the day, and you can't justify that. You know, wrong is. Well, put it like this. I think everybody's values is based off them. You know, and how they was raised. To me, that's not justifying you stealing from your parents, stealing from anyone, but stealing from your parents even more so is even worse. You know, so being I don't want to say confused. That's why I'm kind of scared to talk at times because I don't know what to say and what not to say. So,
this is a safe space. If you slip up on a word, ain't nobody coming at you. We're all learning.
But being confused or looking for a path doesn't justify the wrong at the end of the day. You know,
what do y'all think about what he just said? Because that's a very, very powerful point.
I have to agree. But I feel like it was a fine line for her too.
A fine line how?
Yeah, fine line in what sense?
I feel like, I don't know, I think you might have said this earlier, or it might have been Sherry. It was like a scream, like she was screaming out somehow, you know, for like, I don't know, I felt like she was almost screaming out for help, you know, for somebody to just like allow her to be who she is somehow.
But wouldn't that mean that she still has the issue because she was screaming out for help and she didn't learn how to ask for help. So that means her doing what she did, she still has that issue there. It's like underlining this for some reason. I mean, that's just my rationale.
I'm not saying she did it in the right way. I'm just saying that she was definitely screaming out for somebody's attention, somebody to help her through this.
I agree. I agree to her. I agree somewhat to what you're saying. Maybe she wanted the money. Maybe she felt that she deserved it, like somebody owed her something. Maybe I wasn't the child that was the best child or the favorite child because I was different, and it's not what my parents wanted me to be. So guess what? I feel entitled to that money. I feel that I'm gonna make up for something that I'm lacking. So guess what? I know how to get somebody's attention. I'm gonna take it. And guess what? She got everybody's attention after that.
Okay, you know? Including the NYPD. What did y'all think
exactly.
Simone, and up until then, everybody just tried to ignore everything about her.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Up until she did that, everybody just tried to slide everything she was doing under the table. They tried to ignore her wigs and her makeup and borrowing Selenis clothes and behaving the way she was. Everybody just tried to like push it under the rug, and then she did that.
Yeah,
you know?
she took
ignore her anymore.
You got it. She took charge of the situation and she demanded attention and she got it. And unfortunately, like people say, sometimes negative attention is good attention.
Yeah, sometimes negative attention is better than any.
Exactly, especially when you're lacking attention from your parents, the people that you love.
I know that. I'm a school teacher in middle school, and I see that kind of behavior all the time from middle school kids.
I wanted to say, this is not like in opposition to what people are saying about how do we look at what she did there, but I wanted to share like that, what do we make about how her mother forgave her? And what was what was the power of that? Because I was very moved by her parents were so deeply spiritual and so loving, and kind of they share that from the very beginning of the story of how their parents, prayed, and when their little boy was really, really ill, and just how they lived their lives, with such integrity and faith. And And Marisol stole that money from her mother. She stole her card to steal that money. And I was just moved. I wanted to kind of include in our conversation, what do we think about the mother's reaction? Like, how do we hold that her mother was able to forgive her, like from a really deep place? And how did that contribute to Marisol's development, to Marisol's ability to continue to find her way? I'm not sure if I'm making clear, but
No,
it had a very big impact on me that her mother forgave her.
Yes.
And where does that, like, could we do that? Like, we're kind of talking about, what did Marisol do? And I'm thinking, like, what did the mother do? Like, what did the mother do in this situation?
I don't know if that's where the conversation is going. I think we all get, like, we're with her, you know, we don't, it's not that she stole and we're like against her and wagging our finger. I think for a lot of us, it made her, it just humanized her. It took her away. I think that conversation started because we were saying it took it away from her being trans. It's like, okay, I don't care what you are, you want to call she, no problem. She, how are you getting the money? I think that's where the conversation started. But like, we talked about that a lot last week, you know, and or the week before that. But you know, to answer, you know, I have to say this, like, I agree with what you're saying, but you know, to be quite frank, like the forgiveness, it wasn't, let's talk about how whole maybe the forgiveness was, because, you know, remind you that she was not allowed to come to any type of family functions at all. She was eating dinner alone. So I'm not quite sure how strong the forgiveness was. For years, she said it was like that. And furthermore, you know, perhaps, you know, and I'm really not trying to be funny, but perhaps if she hadn't forgiven her, you know, she would not have, perhaps if maybe some tough love like that was implemented when the money was stolen, perhaps she wouldn't have got to the spot where she was dating someone like Josh. Perhaps she wouldn't have got to the place where the house literally had to be, everything in the house had to be thrown out because she was never given any type of discipline, you know, like, and that perhaps maybe the forgiveness was almost like a crutch in her life. Well, I don't know. What do y'all think about that? What do you think about what Ananis just said?
I just want to say I always have to get off at 8 because I have to go to work at 8 on Wednesdays.
Okay,
but I just wanted to say that I'm loving the conversation.
Second, Anais, I just want to thank Anais. She sent me a link earlier in the day about different articles on transgender people published through Yes Magazine, and I've been posting them. So thank you, Anais.
You're welcome. And I also wanted to say that it was, from my reading of the story, it was her father who was so angry at what she did there. And it was her father who would not let her come to the family gatherings. And from the very beginning, the mother always took the food and went next door. And Selenis and her mother always shared those holidays with her and didn't leave her alone. Just to, you know, just kind of my memory of that.
Oh, is that? No, I don't think that's how it went. Is that how it went? I'm sorry, I must have read it wrong. I thought she couldn't come over, and so she only got a plate.
Well, she couldn't come over, but it was because the father prohibited her. The father wouldn't let her back into the family. And they, in the beginning, they kind of, you know, quietly, surreptitiously made that plate of food and brought it over. And then I remember in the story, after a while, the father says, "Did you make a plate for her?" Right. Like the father's moving through his own process, you know, of can he come to the place where he forgives her. And then at the party, I can't remember which it was, if it was her 21st birthday or maybe it was the Christmas, but it's the first time that she comes.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and then her father, you know, puts his arm around her and he says, "I love you and I will always love you." And it was kind of, for me, his act of forgiveness. "You're my daughter." Yeah, "You're my daughter." And that was his act of forgiveness. It took him many years to come to that place. Anyway, I do gotta go.
I also think we have to remember that that point brings up how young Marisol is. Yeah. You know, while all of this is going on, she is, what, 20? So like all the the stealing of the money, trying to build her own or trying to find her own community, the issues she then has with the not order protection, but having to stay away from the parents, whatever that's called. This is like, and she's barely 20. So there's so much going on. You get a sense of an older person, but she's still a kid.
I would like to add, this is Liliana, in terms of the forgiveness part and like thinking about the mother and just thinking that every mother wants their child to, be safe. I mean, this is what I assume for like that they want the best for the children. And even after when Marizol was getting arrested, she could not bear it. So she walked away with Selenis. They didn't want to be there. And, the mom was the person that kept pushing to be, if they could have taken away, like retract the arrest and such. But I think that comes from a place of love and, not wanting to cause harm to their children and such. And she always deep down wanted the best for her. And so I think that forgiveness, her child was always there. And I could see that she was struggling when she had to take that plate, hidden from the father and such. But, that forgiveness was always meant to be there in the early stage when, that incident happened, and it was slowly always happening because, again, she wanted the best for her. Which was very admirable to say.
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, I think maybe Liliana went out.
I think she just stepped out.
Sorry, my phone fell off, but I'm trying.
I think that, what are some other, this conversation's so great. What are some other thoughts y'all had? I know we had I remember the first, or maybe it was the second session that we had, a lot of us were wondering and speculating about if Marizol had been molested. And we finally find out, way at the end of the book, like in the 200s. What did y'all think about that? Like, did you think let me ask you this. Did you think as a memoir, that should have been information we had sooner? What did y'all think about kind of the placement? And did you think that we were entitled to more info? What do y'all think about that?
I actually thank you for bringing that up, Brandon, because there were other things too that I was very curious about the placement. But, they did mention that writing this book was also like a discovery. So I think about whether, if it was intentional, because as they were writing the book, they were finding about things. And they did say in the book that I think Selenis did mention that she learned some of these things as they were writing the book. So I wonder if that was part of the placement. Because also with the sex work, when she was young and doing all of that, she didn't disclose that. And so she later on disclosed it when she started dating that, believe Josh, the ex-partner. And that's when I was very curious, why wasn't this shared at the time in the book at that age? So then with her disclosing too of her father molesting her, I was like, okay, this is part of her actually coming out and saying all these things, because they actually didn't talk about that. So I thought it was very interesting, that placement, and also having the audience, the readers, on that journey too.
I'm sure that I'm sure this book, as far as Marizol is concerned, I can almost guarantee that this book has probably only scratched the surface of a lot of what this poor girl probably went through in her life. I'm sure there's a lot of things that she never would share in this book because some things are just probably so painful that you just don't want to tell everybody what's going on, which is why it was nice of Brendan to start this with everyone writing a memoir. It's hard to really put yourself out there to the world for people to judge you, you know? Would I really want to write a book and tell people that I was molested by my father? That's hurtful. And it's embarrassing, and I can't even imagine. And then you have to think of how her father felt to have that put into a book for the world to read, especially on the flip side, knowing that her sister is in the limelight. You know, people judge you for every little thing that you do. And, you know, I give them the utmost respect for putting what they put in that book, but I would love to be the person to sit down like a homegirl with her and pick her brain to find out what really, really went on in her life.
Didn't they say they had to go to counseling to even, before they even started writing the book, they had to go to counseling?
And that's deep. And that's deep, just to get your mind right, to be able to accept some of the things that you're going to put on paper now so that people can read this stuff about you. I wouldn't want my life to be the subject of every. Can you imagine when Marisol gets around her friends or gets around people and people have read that book? Now they want to talk about the book, and maybe that's not something she wants to talk about, you know, but I'm sure it comes up quite a bit when she's around people that she knows and people that she meets for the first time.
That's such a good point. I think that what you just said, Simone, it's kind of like what we did at the beginning of the meeting. If you can imagine writing down the one thing, or talking about putting into a book, the one thing you would struggle to say out loud, she put that in a book. So I think that might have been, I don't know, but I think that might have been part of the reason why it did come across maybe as an afterthought.
Exactly.
Like it came out and maybe she was encouraged, no, put this story in here, put it out there, free yourself of it. And maybe that's why it did read like an afterthought, because it was.
I agree. I totally agree. She probably struggled with that as to whether to put it in or not, which is why it came later and not at the beginning, because technically it should have been something that came at the beginning because it happened at the beginning. But it's just weird. You're right. Well, everyone is right, and how things were placed at different points of the actual book.
And Jessica,
it was intentional too. Maybe she didn't want the focus to be on that.
Yeah.
To be on the fact that she was molested, because maybe she didn't want people to think, oh, maybe that's why she's transgender, because people are ignorant enough to believe things like that.
Absolutely right.
Maybe right. Jessica, she left it for later.
Yeah. Jessica, you were about to chime in. Did you have something you wanted to add? No, it's fine.
Hey, yes, I was going to say that that was one of the questions that I was looking forward to asking her tonight. The feedback she got from the people closest to her that were involved in her life, and how her story shaped. And also I wanted to ask her, because remember in the beginning of the conversation, you guys were discussing whether or not someone being, because we had the speculations, but then someone said, you know, that might be why she, you know, was transgender, or, you know, and then someone else that I can't remember who said, and I thought was a great point, because up until then, I had never thought of it that way, that, you know, we're always looking for a reason as to why, to say, and let them, they can just be without a reason. Everyone that I know that is gay, one of my really good friends, they have been molested. But after that conversation, you know, I had to take a step back. Like, I don't know everyone that's gay or transgender, and I don't know the reason why they are. And does it have to be a reason? And also, so I wanted to know what she thought about that. And also when she spoke about in the book being transgender, and I quote, she said, is a biological fact, and she didn't really expand on it anymore. And I was really curious to know more, because I didn't really know how to understand that. So yeah, those are things that I wanted to ask her about tonight, like what she thought about that.
I was also
yeah,
looking forward to speaking to her, not to cut you off, because I noticed that when we had our last sit down with her and her sister did most of the talking. Marisol did very little talking. She chimed in every now and then, but her sister kind of like took control of our last conversation with them and did probably 80% of the question answering. Even when something was directed at Marisol, her sister would chime in and it was like 1 to 100. You know, she was kind of like in that protective mode to explain what needed to be explained. And Marisol really never kind of got a lot of her points across. It was after something that her sister said. So it just would have been kind of nice to have her on without her sister, where we can kind of like throw those questions at her and it's not someone else chiming in to add or rebut something that she was saying.
It's funny, Simone, I noticed the same exact thing. I did. I noticed that. I was like, wow, you know, she's kind of taking over her side of the story. You know, I understood her speaking her side, you know, her portion of the story. But she also took over Marisol's portion of the story sometimes.
Fascinating. Does anyone else feel like that? Because I did not see that. Does anyone
Oh, I did.
Like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
I didn't see that, but I was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was chiming in to agree. I think that her sister Selenis totally dominated, and for that same reason, because there were things that I think Marizol may have answered differently or given us a little more had she not been paired with her sister. And I haven't gone back, but like I would be interested to see the one-on-one interviews, if there are any, with just Marizol.
Well, you guys, I follow Marizol on Instagram, and she attempted to do a continuation of the book study. She's like, oh, I'm just so excited. She was real wound up and excited about everything, and she read a couple of chapters and she let people ask questions, but you know, I think that was probably her first go around, and you know, she would answer some half-heartedly, I think.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of the reading, was I the only one that was concerned that she might have read till 8:30?
You know, this is sometimes I was talking with someone else about this. So sometimes we take for granted that people who write books sort of know like what to read and how long to read. And when people are new to publishing and they get their shot, you know, they read what they want to read. They're not thinking in terms of the audience, they're thinking in terms of conveying their message wholly. So if that took her reading for almost 20 minutes, then she felt like that was the most important segment of the book for her to read. I was also concerned, but the thing that I have to kind of keep in mind is, how does everyone else feel? You know, because it seemed as though people really connected to that reading and felt like it was really important for her to read that much of her book. But again, like comparing her to her sister, who is I'm sure, more versed in how to engage an audience and that balance, like Selenis may have read a page, you know, and that page was impactful. But Marisol, maybe not being as sort of seasoned in public readings, just said, yo, I'm reading 50 pages. And, you know, if it takes, you know, X amount of time, so be it. But, you know, she might learn from this and so on and so forth.
I think it's because I listened to the audiobook. I didn't have the physical book. So like when everyone was saying they loved her reading and they understood it from a, you know, just more powerful and all this stuff. I was like, I get it after. But while she was reading, I didn't get to ask any questions when I wanted to. I was just loving the discussion so much that after every paragraph, I thought she was going to be done and she started a new one, and I was just like, But I did enjoy it though.
Yeah, no, it was cute. Like it was nice. But yeah, I was concerned for sure. I liked
that's why I hoped she would come back tonight.
Yeah.
And I was excited that she initially agreed to come back.
I'm actually glad that I'm part of me is glad that she is not here though, because if she was here, we wouldn't be able to have had this very rich dialogue, I don't think, that we had. So it's a good thing. Does anyone else have anything they want to just chime in on real quick? I have a couple more points that I want to make, but I do also want to open the floor if anybody wants to propose a question or chime in on anything that we've said so far.
I wanted to say something. It's a little backtrack to something that was spoken about earlier around the stealing conversation, that I have a hard time separating that, like her identity and stuff, because that's part of what I was hearing and what Greg was saying of, it's not to excuse it, but that's part of what explains what occurred. And that with the mom forgiving her, what I understood was her actually getting that. Like, what was the motivation behind that? And what am I potentially losing if I choose that over the person that I've also said I love? And that for me, I was experiencing the dad and really the other men of what was said earlier too, that stealing moment was also a reckoning for everyone involved, not just for Marizol. Of that now the box is fully open and we can't ignore the thing that we've been choosing to ignore. And that in that moment of her really getting to finally try to be herself, be self-expressed, the question then becomes for everyone else around her, are you living in your truth? How are you showing up for you in the ways that you need to be self-expressed fully? And that people have a hard time with that. And that it's also a threat to whatever you're comfortable with. That as even Selenis was saying last week, that they had to have a moment of acknowledging a quote unquote loss of this person that they had loved or whatever, but truly seeing that they were already there. That I'm thinking too of, that's something as a man in a culture that is promoting macho and all this other stuff. What does that mean to lose your son potentially, right? And that reckoning of like, now I can reason it because this child of mine has stolen from me. So that you've also done something wrong in that way to further justify whatever ways I'm going to ostracize you. That's also what's happening. There's a disagreement with this person's life. It's not just because they stole them, but that was adding to the reasoning of why they have a hard time communicating in the first place. That, again, I'm not justifying stealing of any kind, but I want to be careful about making it about morals or those types of things when part of what was happening was literal survival. That a lot of us can relate to us doing whatever we think is right to fit in, but it's different in this case. Unless we're trans inside of this conversation, we can relate, but it's not the same thing as wanting to fit in or that type of thing. That it's literally in being in environments where that's what felt like was gonna get her through. And obviously there was an abuse. At some point she understood, I can get away with this. And greed is what gets people caught when it comes to stealing and those types of things. But that's part of how that came to light. But I'm just saying of like, if that moment was an explosion around her identity and what other people were ignoring, then we also have to talk about what was the reckoning for the other people involved too. And the ways that family or other people who claim to love you get defensive and potentially push you away when you're living in your truth, which means that they have to live in theirs and they're not willing to do that work yet. How that creates tension too inside of families. Because that's something I've experienced as a queer person in my family and close circles of, once you really are living in your truth, not just declaring or doing those things, but moving in that way, now you're requiring the other people potentially around you who love you to do that. It's in the subtitle of the book, the transition that changed both of us, that it wasn't just the shift around her life, but around everyone that was around her over the years that was happening. And even still, I imagine, as they're still working through what that means to have all these people in their family.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cleveland. And I think that, you know, this is a tricky conversation, right? Because you're right in everything that you said. But I also agree with some of the other things that were said when people are talking about stealing for survival. Like, that is a fact, like you said. Like, she really couldn't even, and then I thought about it, you know, when I read her story and she's like, I really couldn't even get a job at like a sandwich shop. You know, I thought about that and I was like, how many trans people have I seen working at Walgreens? None, because they don't hire them. They don't hire trans people, they don't hire them. And
well,
I thought about
we shouldn't say none, because we don't know how people are identifying or that type of thing. Maybe you weren't.
Right, right. I'm saying like people who you can, who
You mean passing?
Exactly. Like, so I thought about that deeply and I'm like, oh my God, because I guess all of the trans people I know do work in sex work. That is the truth. Every last trans, none of them have regular job. All of them work in sex work, which is a regular job, but I don't know any of them who work at like a sandwich shop. And I thought about that deeply and I agree with you and you're right. However, I think what a lot of people also in this chat are saying is that steal for survival, go ahead. However, you stole from your parents. Matter of fact, you stole from the people who took you in when your own parents gave you away. I think that is the bigger conversation around this specific book club, is that people are like, you stole from your family, which is a bigger thing, right? I think that's kind of really what ruffled a lot of feathers. And it's not a judgment thing. It's more of a, to me, that's so beautiful because it's really not, it's judging, but it's not judging because of what you think people would be judging her for, right? I feel like we're judging her with stealing the money on a more human level, on a more strip everything away. Like you stole from your parents, you stole from the people who took you in when you didn't have nowhere else to go. Like, I think that is what really, when you hear those conversations, and I know you haven't been here the past few weeks, but when you hear those conversations being had tonight, I think a lot of that, and correct me if I'm wrong with y'all, but a lot of that is where people are coming from. Like, okay, you stole. A lot of us have had to steal for survival, you know, but I think that this conversation was kind of built off of that pulse. Right? That, oh my God, not only did you steal, but you stole from your family, your mother, the most forgiving, most faithful, most Catholic, most like beautiful, clean person like there is. That's who you choose to steal from. I think that was like more of the conversation that was like happening. Does that make sense, Cleaver?
It does. And I'm not taking away from that. If anything, I'm adding to the question of like, I guess I'm thinking more about the why. And isn't it actually, to me, the bigger question really is, that's really sad that it took something like that for the rest of the people to be literally ignoring her, which meant denying her existence. For everyone to have that moment, to me, that's the bigger question, is why does that have to get to that extreme? Yeah. And remember, at 16, developmentally, you literally can't even think ahead. You're not thinking about the future. You can't do that. You're thinking more immediately and whatever is happening around those decisions. That, to me, the bigger question is more of the conditions. Like, how do we even get there in the first place? Imagine if she wasn't experiencing depression and feeling lack of community and all those things from the people that took her in, from the people that protected her when other people threw her away. How could that have been different? Of the ways that, not even just acceptance, but literally just understanding and truly unconditional love. Not just to speak of it, but that her trying to live into that as a test of that. They're testing some of that. What is the conditions of our love then? Because it seems that when I spoke into my truth, people reacted around me in a certain way. And obviously it's complicated, but I'm adding to that question of even beyond the stealing, how did we get there? That's the thing that really created the reckoning or the breaking open of that tide.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I want to hear what y'all have to say, what someone else has to respond to Cleaver about. But to me, like, I agree with what you're saying, but to me, it is like, because you, first and foremost, unconditional love cannot be defined. And if anything, unconditional love is defined by when you break that love, if I still love you. That's what unconditional love is. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you stole that $18K from me and I still loved you, I still made sure you had a plate, I'm pretty sure that's what you should be defining as. You see what I'm saying? Like, that is unconditional love to me. You don't know what unconditional love is until the conditions are broken.
Exactly, until it's tested.
So I think that's for us, for me at least, and I think for a lot of other people in this book club, for us, that is what, like, and I'm saying us just because it's the first time we've seen you and we love having you, we hope you come back. But I think that idea, right, is what I feel kind of catapulted the human of Marizol and not the transgender, like take all those labels away. I think that vulnerability, that mistake, right, that embarrassing moment really is what catapulted us into into her humanness, into her, I don't know, I want to hear from somebody else. What do y'all think about what Cleaver is saying?
You're right. There's no title to a thief. A thief is a thief.
I think what he was saying, I'm listening to him. I hear where he's coming from, but I think his message was more, you know, I'm taking it as hurt people hurt people. Now, I'm looking at Marisol as being hurt. She stole from people who loved her, but also it begs the question of whatever you pretend to be, you will be tested on that. If you pretend to love me unconditionally, so she went out and struck out and stole. Now, is the unconditional love still there? I can't see justification for her actions, but at the same time, it's like she's begging for help. But this is the problem I have. Everybody, I think, coming up as a kid, adolescent, has identity crisis. All right? Everybody goes through identity crisis. So I'm not gonna lend more because they're trans, because I think everybody has that thing. I think equality is equality. I'm not gonna give you more credence or more slack because you're transgender or not, because you're supposed to have it equally anyway. So to put it on there, I think it kind of bends. The identity crisis that she's going through, she's striking out. She wants help. Bring that fast forward. When she was reading last week, I think that's part of her healing process. She still hasn't healed because she still wants to vent and put that out there. So when you said that I thought she read too much, but that's part of her healing. I don't want to get in the way of that. You know, so that's what I caught on.
Yeah, thank you, Messiah. What are some other thoughts on that?
I think that was an excellent point about that was part of her healing process. And I think for me, the struggle with the whole stealing thing, it would have been one thing if the money was used at a point where she was struggling and she was on her own, but she had a home, she was loved, she was sheltered, she was cared for at the time that it happened. And it was just hard to understand why you would steal $18,000. And I didn't associate it with anything to deal with her being transgender or struggling. If anything, it seemed like it was a cry for attention because she was going to the clubs and she wanted to, you know, treat her friends and this, that, and the other. And she wanted to be accepted and she wanted to be noticed and liked, maybe for all the wrong reasons and all the wrong ways. I definitely agree. It was, I don't know, I still label it as being selfish. You knew what you were doing, you knew it was wrong, and you did what you did, and we shouldn't make excuses for that. But I also think it was a cry for help, or maybe a cry for attention rather, not a cry for help. But yeah, I just didn't understand it. But
I'm just loving this so much. I'm just loving this whole conversation. What do some other people think? Like, what do y'all think about that? Because for me, I guess, I don't know. To me, it's like, it just really, really humanized her. It didn't make her anything except selfish, right? It was, everything else was stripped away except selfishness or I don't know, something I can associate with anyone else that I have in my life. It was not, I don't know, to me, that huge mistake that she made, for some reason, it made me feel for her more.
Brandon, if your sister steals 18 grand from you, you're gonna say, oh, thank you, sister. I feel closer to you now.
no.
I love you even more. Now that I can't pay my rent for a couple months, I love you even more.
Okay, no,
but also it's like, who else?
Sometimes you have to put questions in a personal context. So think of that. Like she stole 18 grand from you.
You're right.
I'm not judging her. I understand she needs, a community, and she's like Latisha said, like these are common, things that people go through regardless of whether you are trans or whether you are, Black or whether you are a woman or, not to kind of try to lump everything together, but they're just issues that we all go through. And how forgiving are we when they are that personal, when we're on the sort of receiving end of a crime, but committed by somebody you love. I have these people in my family, you know, and like how much space, how much love can you immediately return to that person? You know, maybe over time you might forgive them, but you know, that initial sort of feeling.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, it wasn't a trans issue. It wasn't, like Latisha said, I think it was pretty much a human issue. Like, we all make mistakes. We all are responsible for our actions. I don't think I shouldn't say I don't think her actions were because she was trans. No, I don't want to speak for her because she had her own her own reasons why she did it, but I just feel like that is an issue. And for me, it was more a trust issue. Now, I, as your parent, can no longer trust you. It's not about forgiving. It's not about, because I mean, eventually, like, time wears off, you forgive people, you don't forget, but that trust factor, but that to me is like, I don't care if you were trans, if you were any kind of other term or pronoun you want to put out there. For me, it was more, you're my daughter, or son first, daughter, and then you stole from me. Now I can't trust you. That was more for me how I felt. It was more a trust issue, not because you took it to do whatever you wanted to do with it, get accepted from others, or use it to party, whatever she decided to do with it.
Really quick, to the point of stealing from your mom. I stole $20 from my mom one time. She's the only person I've ever stolen money from. I love my mother to death, and till this day, every time I think about it, I feel bad about it. I wanted to buy some little G-Unit shirt for my little 14-year-old boyfriend at the time. But it's like, hearing that, it makes me think, like, who else was she gonna steal from? That's what she had access to. She couldn't go somewhere else. I'm sure she would have much preferred to get it from somewhere else, but that's where she knew where it was. It was, you know, she didn't think maybe there were the consequences. Maybe she thought she wouldn't be found out. It was just easy. I don't think it, you know, it was her intentionally trying to hurt her parents, or she probably, I mean, not probably, but it was selfish, but not in the sense like she was intentionally trying to hurt her mom. Just her, just in the kid's mind. Like, and I remember reading Michelle Obama's book one time, and she was talking about when she was a kid, she never really thought about what her mother's days were like. And when we're kids, we're kind of selfish in that sense. And then I thought about it, I'm like, I never asked my mom, you know, what her day, I mean, kind of do once in a while, but you never really think about what your mom goes through throughout the day, you know, as a kid.
Right, so, because parents are supposed to be, I mean, you know this now, Jessica, parents are supposed to be like superpower people.
Exactly.
I mean, like,
literally.
Who cares? You don't have feelings, and that's it. And I'm gonna steal money from you, and you know, whatever. Like, you'll get over it. I mean, I don't think it was probably thought of with that respect, or with that regard. I don't know.
I'm sure she didn't give, Marisol did not give much thought to the impact on her parents.
Right.
I agree. I think an opportunity presented itself, and she took it. Opportunity presented itself, and she went with that opportunity, and she didn't have a care in the world about who was being hurt, whether she'd have to pay it back, will she go to jail. Kids these days, unfortunately, they live in the moment. They live in the moment, unfortunately.
Kids have always lived in the moment, not just these days.
That's it. And you know, they just don't have, a lot of kids just don't have any regard to the consequences of what they do. That's you know, and then when it all comes full circle and they find themselves in trouble, now they're looking at their parents saying, do something, help me, get me out of jail.
But don't you think that speaks to, doesn't it speak to the parents as well? Because I hear what you're saying, but I had to disagree with you. I mean, I couldn't steal from my parents. I don't care if it was a penny. You know, if you can steal from your parents or you can be disrespectful to your parents, imagine what you do to people who you don't know. That says a lot about you. You know, if you could, at the end of the day, you could look at someone outside of your family. Think about this is someone who's raising you, someone who's taking you in or comforting you or whatever. And that's the person you're striking out against. Imagine the people you care nothing about.
I think it's different if they were older. I think if they were 16, they're only thinking about themselves at that moment.
They're not thinking about it that
Marizol would do that at her age now. I think it speaks differently if they were older. But yeah, I think Ron made a fantastic point, really bringing it home to how, you know, what she did and why she did it. I know without a shadow of a doubt, if my sibling stole $18,000 from my mother, I know how that story would end. Now, how would I tell the story 10 years later is what's happening. That's how they're telling the story after years upon years upon years of healing. But we're just reading it and we're like taken aback. So I can only imagine how it was in that moment, but I can't imagine it being as tranquil as it was written in the book. I think that's a lot of healing that came with those words.
Yeah. And but aren't we looking at it from older people's eyes? Put yourself back when you were 16. I don't. Right. We're saying it in hindsight, which is 2020. Right. So put yourself back at 16. Would you have stolen from your parents? So I can't let that go.
If I was 16 and I wanted to go out with my friends and I didn't have any money and I knew where my mom kept her money or whatever, and I thought that I could get away with it, look, I'm not gonna put myself out there. I'm just saying.
but you're talking about $10, $20.
Yeah, that's true. Ron's right. But
most people, when they steal, quote unquote, steal from unquote, steal from their parents, they're taking $5. They're taking $10,
$20.
Change.
Exactly. And you're not thinking it's gonna hurt them if they did it. They would even notice that it's gone. That is, it's just this. They have a lot more. They're not gonna notice this little $20 is gone.
Yeah. But to Cleaver's point, he also pointed out that the adolescent brain that we've all had, and some of us still may have. That that brain is not equipped to think about tomorrow, and think about the ramifications of your actions. That's why we don't really trust teens so much.
That's true.
I mean, we know.
Well, it's not fully developed.
Yeah.
I love what Latisha said. That's the problem. We just couldn't see that happening and there was no consequence. And I think that's where I am. And Latisha, you summed it up perfectly. We know there's going to be a butt whipping. There's going to be you're going to get several butt whippings. And, I'm not condoning whatever, but I'm just saying, I can't even imagine that happening. You'd be getting whippings probably until you pay off that money or do something.
And you're right. And you're 100% right.
I agree with y'all. Can I propose this though? This one thing I totally agree with both of you. And I I get it. But don't y'all? I mean, just humor me. Don't y'all think that perhaps that closeness of that family, having that stripped from Marizol, which it was, she was eating dinner alone for years. Like having that closeness and those gatherings and the barbecues and the Christmas, having that stripped from her life. Y'all don't think that was punishment? Y'all don't think that was a significant punishment?
I think so. I think she felt it.
It was guilt more than punishment.
She made it really clear in the book and her writing that she felt that. She said, no, I gotta go and eat, by myself. I spent many holidays by myself. She talked about being alone a lot and how it affected her.
Yeah, can you imagine how you would feel?
How much she missed them. She said that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? Probably ate her alive.
Can you imagine how any of us would feel if you were totally alienated from your family on like major holidays when families get together and it's all about love and joy and games and laughter, and you're kind of like ostracized and thrown to the side like you don't even matter? I can't even imagine, you know, how she felt.
Yeah, I guess the question is like, is that, you know, did the punishment fit the crime? I guess it's kind of like where we're getting to. Like the punishment was, you know, having that unconditional love stripped away, you know, like, okay, you want to steal from us? Now you're going to see what it feels like when you don't have us on July 4th or Columbus Day or whatever holiday they celebrate, you know, like as a family. Like, did that? I think it did. Honestly, I really do. Like, I hear what everyone's saying, but I really do think, you know, in light of everything, that the punishment really did fit the crime. You know, being separated from the family was a huge, huge blow for Marizol. Y'all don't, like Miss Sherry, for example, you don't think so? You think like some more accountability? Because I agree with you. I didn't get as much accountability from Marizol that I would have liked to have. Like, actually, at least on paper. Like, I agree with you with that. But I do think that pain, loneliness.
You know, as close as the family appeared to be, to me, that was just far out. I guess I'm still trying to grasp how close the family really was. Were they close? You know, was she considered an outsider, you know, since she was adopted? I don't know. There's some dynamics that were probably left out of the book. So to me, that doesn't really fit with, I love my family and all of that. I'm still trying to figure out where things different because she was adopted.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
You're right.
And I guess I'm trying to understand that where that fits within the whole process of the family love.
Sherry, I kind of get that feeling as well. Kind of like, oh, she should, I don't know, sometimes I got that feeling like she should have appreciated us after what we did for her. But when you really love somebody, it shouldn't matter that, you know, where they came from or whatever, right? Like we're talking about here is unconditional love, right? You love them no matter what. But I felt like, I don't know, like I wonder if it would have been the same kind of punishment for any other one of the kids. Like if they would have been treated the same way. Do you see what I'm saying? Like what if Selenis would have done it? You know, or one of the other siblings. I wonder if they would have been treated the same way. I couldn't help think about that.
I'm just so grateful that you said that. I've been trying to figure out a way to frame that, and you said it perfectly.
So
yeah.
How about how she felt? How about how Marisol felt? Forget about I spoke about the trust, but also the feeling that she felt of, you know what, I'm going to steal this money. How did she feel about her mom to do that as a person, right? Like my mom just jumped off the board, but I will tell you this much. I am a grown woman with my own kids. My mom will instill the state of fear in me. What happened? Like, you would not have the opportunity to steal any amount of money from your parent, whether it's an adopted child or a foster child or whatever. The thing is that you have to have that bond, that trust with your parent, or that respect for your parent not to do anything like that. And that's the way I feel more so. I understand she feels like she had her own reasons, and who knows if, like Anna Marie was saying, if it was another child or whatever. I mean, particularly we were talking about Marisol, but I don't know. It's like, did you not fear me? Did you think that I was so gullible that you would just like steal from me and it would be okay? No, I don't know. Maybe because at that age, people don't care. Kids don't care. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. And now whatever, suffer the repercussions later.
I agree with you. I think it's still, like you said, the consequences. I think, but I'm gonna go a step further. I think it comes to the point when you were saying how she was eating alone, but I think that has a little sprinkles of selfishness on it, because what about the family who's eating without her? Like, did she take a second to think about my actions caused my mother or my, my parents not to have me? That says, sometimes we just think about ourselves, like we're doing without. What about the family who's doing without them? Whatever the reasons were. So that's like a selfish mentality in a way, so.
It's one of those things, two wrongs make a right, I don't know, because I know growing up for me, it was so much respect for my mother growing up. I don't know if it was because it was a single mom with 5 kids living in the projects, and my mother had to hold it down and keep everything in line, keep us in line. Even to this day, 55-year-old grown woman, my youngest sibling is 55 years old. And when we're around our mom, you never hear one curse word. If somebody has to curse, we kind of like, Mom, listen, I'm going to say a curse because I have to tell a story. And she chuckles about it to this day. And she's like an 80-year-old woman. But it's just that sense of respect where I knew, we knew better. You don't steal from her. Absolutely not. But everybody doesn't have that kind of upbringing, where there's a respect in the home now. Some of that's out the window, and we can all attest to that by seeing the way a lot of these kids talk to their parents. I would never have disrespected my mother, never. And it just blows my mind how kids treat and speak to their parents now, and it's okay.
You guys, going back to the beginning of the book, we could think about how the mother was really not the active person. It was Selenis. She was more actively involved as the mother and parent. So again, there could be some different dynamics going on as far as what she felt about the mother. So therefore, if Selena was always in that role as the mother and the maternal figure, then there could be something where maybe Marizol just felt, I felt your mother. I don't know.
But really quickly, this is just, I'm really loving this whole conversation. If y'all, we have to wrap up this Zoom call, but I don't know, if y'all are interested, either say a yes or maybe pop it in the chat. We can do like an IG live for another maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever, kind of continuing the discussion, or we could, just wrap it up now. So what are y'all thoughts?
I would join IG. I don't have IG.
Me either. I don't use Instagram.
This was just such a great conversation. Ron, I don't know where, is Ron still here? Ron might have left me.
You don't see me?
At 8:30. So
this was great.
Yeah, no, this is so great.
I just want to let everyone know, I really appreciate everyone that's on this Zoom, that everyone who participated in this particular book. It's been just like great dialogue. A lot of us were able to really talk back and forth on a personal level, where we all had a lot of different things to share. Some of what came from the book and some of what came from our own experiences. And it's nice to read a book where you can all kind of identify with different things that are going on in the story that you read in your own life.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Simone, and participating.
I just want to say thanks to everyone too. This has been great. I have to hop off, but I really appreciate y'all. Y'all have been a lifesaver through this pandemic, and I hope to join you guys again soon for the next few.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
So much, Linda.
So yes, I guess we're going to wrap it up. We went into overtime a little bit tonight. Thanks everybody for participating. The next book is Dominicana. We start that next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. I've been sending the information, so if you have not registered yet, you can go to our website, onebookonebronx.com. You can register there. I think that's it. I just want to thank everybody coming out, hanging out a little later than normal. It's past my bedtime, so I appreciate everyone who committed some time to joining us every week to build these conversations. I always say, like, this is not my book club, it's your book club. So if you participate, it's a more vibrant space. Even if you don't participate, but you still come, you're welcome. You are always welcome in this space. So thank you so much. Some people don't talk for a year, then all of a sudden, boom, they ready. And then they talk for half an hour, and then we don't hear from them for another year. But you know, that's cool. That's cool also. So thank you all for coming.